Okay, so the terminology subtrack, trying to see how we're going to be using the terminology in the subtrack, how we're going to use the fire services, and how we're going to map the vocabularies that we have in each country with the standardized terminology. And this is an exercise that I believe is very interesting. We learned quite a lot after seeing this because it's a demonstration of interoperability. And the way that we do it might not be, I mean, this is a connectathon, but I think it's very interesting because from here, you can take ideas that can later be implemented at the local level. And you will see what I mean in just a few more minutes. In the previous meeting, we told you about the fire terminology module. And this is the core. Everything you know about terminology will be connected to these three resources: code system, value sets, and concept maps. We're going to see how we're going to do it in the case of the Connectathon. We know that the code system, Lonic, ICD, SNOMED, they're all code systems, and the value sets are small lists within the code system, and the concept map is a relationship between two value sets. And this is what the summary. When you say it has a terminology server, we're talking about these three things. When you say, oh, we want to look for a procedure for a prescription, that's an expansion of a value set. Value sets are procedures. The expansion search a term, and with that term, I can filter the value set with what I'm searching for. When you say, I want to do a report with the ICD-10, that uses a concept map, and so on and so forth. With these three functions, you can actually solve the needs of everything related to terminology. So this is basically the Connectathon is about looking at how the data from an electronic health record that you have stored in your country can create and can use standard resources. And it's interesting because we have been, in the previous webinar, we said it's not only creating the resources. If we receive a resource, just like the one that I have issued from another end, how can I use it? How can I make sure that that resource can be included to our medical or health records in order to make it useful, which is actually the realization of this interoperability is sharing, but making sure that whoever receives it can use it just as if they had issued it. And then we have these conventions and agreements for interoperate. So when we define projects like IPS LAC or the ICPV, the vaccination certificates, we have implementation guides. And there we have terminology bindings defined. Every field in the resources that will be shared, which are the value terminologies that are acceptable. We can see primary and additional bindings, so different codes that we can have access to. So these bindings are defined. This code system will be used, I don't know, ICD-10, SNOMED, and within SNOMED, this is the part that we're going to use. We have then a value set. And we can see how these models with the different value sets are used for terminology binding. Now, when we want to load into information within the EHR, there, again, we also use our terminology bindings. I have a field that allows for the physician to register a diagnosis. We have our terminology binding there. For example, we say they can input concepts from this code system, and that will have a value set assigned. Within the code system, the acceptable part for that procedure is, well, procedures, if it's procedures, diagnosis, if it's only diagnoses. So that is the value sets. If it's a pharmaceutical information, it might have only one value set, for example. So the expansion of a value set, which is very similar to the code system. So currently, this is not something that you're doing with fire servers. You have a table, right, that have your terminology, and when you make an expansion of the value set, you do an SQL on the table. But it's the new philosophy, the standardized way of doing it, and you could use Fire for your own code. Fire does not mean that it only has to have standardized code. We could put our own code systems within Fire. You could create your value sets and you could create your expansions and take advantage of of the Fire functions. And doing it with Fire, if we change the code systems and I put another one, it'll work because the API is the same one. The terminology servers then do all of this. But when you want to go to a standard or coming from a standard, that's where you use the concept maps. They're not here to entry or to define the requirements of the electronic records. You use them to convert. So if the objective, which is creating an IPS, implies that from the code systems that you have, it could be your own or it could be part of the standard, how they can be converted into what the standard requires. Sometimes you have the code that the standard requires. You have ICD 11, for example, vaccination register, and the standard has the same. So it could be, you could say, I can convert it in SNOMED and I can also add the SNOMED concept and I can use the concept map to place two separate codes to make it out more comprehensive. I mean, sure, if you have SNOMED, but if you want to send just ICD-10, that's all right too, just to make it easier for them to consume the resource. ICD-10, you can use that concept map for that. But it can also be done when receiving. If you receive something that you don't have, you need to convert it. A very concrete example is local codes. When your code system is local, you cannot set local code to a standard resource because nobody knows what the local code system is. I mean, you can send it out, but it's really not very useful. So there you need to use the concept map to send the information according to SNOMED ICD-10, and you need to convert it to when it comes back. So for this to work, there have to be a set of code systems that have to be represented. SNOMED, ICD-10, value sets, subtracks also, and there has to be then a mapping. So the challenge is how to demonstrate that in a Connectathon, how to have an exercise where you can do this so that we can all understand the way it's done. So we have created then this list of terminology. The Raxel team has defined six cases of use based on the clinical cases that will be shared or described in the IPS. From these cases, we extracted the most important clinical concepts. And that means it's not here, but it's six lists. Background information, diagnosis, vaccinations, allergies, medications. Vaccinations is a little bit shorter, but there are 20 diagnoses, 20 medications, 20 allergies, and 20 procedures that is not here. Now, the first two are actually part of the first domain. They have been separated here, but they are both a diagnosis. Background information and diagnosis are part of the same domain. And these two have as a primary binding ICD-10, and you can add a SNOMED that covers the same domain. Vaccinations, see ICD-11. In the case of allergies, it's only SNOMED, and you cannot use any other because you don't have other standardized concept for allergies. In the case of medication, it's mostly SNOMED. You could have a ATC or something else that's standardized, or some national code. If but the same thing for procedures, mostly SNOMED. The objective is then how to go from this to what we were seeing before, this fire structure. We need to transform these, which are some Excel sheets, into fire. So what we do is we have a Python script that will allow you to read these Excel tables and to convert them in fire resources. And once you have the fire resource, then you're going to do a post to our terminology, and we're going to put all of those fire resources within the terminology server. And once it's in there, we're going to be able to use Once we've taught the server what is the local terminology and how it's linked to ICD-10 or SNOMED, it can make the link by using an operation from the concept map translate. So let's go into the details to see how it's executed. This is the way one of the spreadsheets looks, and we're going to be looking at them in just a second. So this is a personal background information. The first two columns are the reference concepts. It's as if it was a Raxel code system, you see? It's not a standard, you're not going to share, you're not going to code it. It's just the pivot based on which the rest of the codes were added. That's the way that we did it, just to make sure that it's clear. We created this code in Excel. You're not going to be use it, but it's the reference concept. It's our pivoting system for us. So codes with text just to be the benchmark, the reference concepts. Then we're going to have the local codes. These local codes are the ones that you have to get in a copy of this spreadsheet. Each country has a copy of the spreadsheet. You can download it, you can put it in Google Drive, do whatever you want with it. And you have to edit those two columns, local code and local term. What is your local code for diabetes mellitus? And then, since we have the standard codes, which is ICD-10 and SNOMED, what if I already use ICD-10 or SNOMED? Then it's very easy. You just can leave that empty. That is to say, you're not going to have local code or local term. You're not going to have a local code system to refer to this terminology. So if you're already using ICD-10 or SNOMED, you have nothing to do there. If you are using ICD-10 but use special codes, then maybe you can update it here if you want to. It's not, you could have all your ICD-10 here as a local code. 40 M49, you can put here M49. You can repeat them here. And then it says it's 20 of them, but I want to make some tests with some additional ones. Sure, you can add lines to this spreadsheet, no problem, and you can add new things. If you add them, then you're going to have to choose your own ICD-10 to search for it in your searchers and the SNOMED code. The Raxel team has already uploaded the SNOMED form, and it's also uploaded the ICD codes and terms. They'll be ready by tomorrow. So the standard codes will actually be provided by the Raxel team, and you have nothing to do there unless you add lines. But if you don't add any, you have not. You don't have to do anything. And then the same thing with the diagnosis, just like background information. Do we have a local code? We do. We put them here. Vaccinations, allergies, the same thing. For each of these 6 tabs, you have to define whether you have a local code or not. And here then we have, once you get the spreadsheet, it'll look like this. This code, ICD-10, these we are going to upload. You don't have to do this. They're standardized and they have to be the same for everybody. It's part of mapping. And these ones are the ones that you do when you go to diagnosis, when you go to vaccinations. They already have the local ICD-11 codes loaded. So it's only these two, the local code and local terms, that you have to fill out. And when you go to allergies or medications or procedures, you can see that there are lines here, dashes, because that's not used in the case of allergies. Therefore, they will not be loaded because there is no coverage for that in ICD-10 or for procedures or for medications. Now, why are we doing all of this? Sure, I mean, a spreadsheet. Well, it's just a mechanism for us to carry out this exercise, because when we run the Python script, what's going to happen is that 39 file resources will be generated. And those resources are 4 code systems, because it's 5 code systems that are, and they are SNOMED, which is preloaded, ICD-10, and it's actually just a fragment of the ICD-10, ICD-11, also a fragment of ICD-11. So ICD-10, ICD-11 to support the mapping. The local code systems that you have, which is going to be different for each server, obviously. In country one, it'll have the local code one, country two might not have one, and local three will have a separate one. So that's going to be different in each case. And then the Raxel, which is the reference that we use for the connectathon, which in practice will not actually be used. It's only for the creation of this. Then we have 23 value sets, and these 23 value sets have fragments of ICD-10, which has all of which is equal to the ICD-10 local concept. And if it's local, it'll have a value set per sheet if you want to use that for data entry. And the same thing for SNOMED, for example. And then it's going to have 12 concept maps. And these concept maps are I mean, the full mapping of SNOMED and ICD-10 has been preloaded. It's ready. But then there will be four maps that will make from anything to the local value. Four mappings to the local value. It could be from ICD-10 and then the value in their local terminology. From ICD-11 to your local terminology. From SNOMED and so on and so forth. Then four that are from the local. If I have a local code, what is the ICD-10 equivalent? What is the SNOMED equivalent? What is the ICD-11? And what is the Raxel equivalent? And these mappings are not complete because for ICD-11, it's only for vaccination. If we have a diagnosis and I ask for an ICD-11, obviously it's not going to bring me anything. Or if it's in ICD-10 and we ask for vaccination, we're not going to get anything either. So each of the mapping covers only what we have within the tabs in the spreadsheet. So it's a translation of that into a file resource. And then we have the two-directional mapping from ICD-10 or SNOMED to ICD-11. So the national node, once you set up the Docker, this is the latest version. I don't know if you have the Docker version from the last week or not, but the latest version has some improvements. So when you install the Docker on terminology, you're going to have these resources. You will have the browser. You can see the terminology, the SNOMED terminology that you have. For example, asthma, and we can look at in SNOMED, and this is a browser that is running. I mean, it says here local host. It's running within the Docker. I've just pressed a play in the Docker and it's still working. The new thing that we've added is this Swagger, which has been designed just to explain how these operations are used in this example. You can use the post map, but Swagger has already built it and it's a lot simpler to show in a presentation such as this one. The postman is too dynamic and it's a little more, it's easier to break something. And then we have the fire server. In the dash fire, we have, for example, here the concept maps. I can put value sets instead of concept map. And then we have the value set. It says that it doesn't know the resource value set. Oh, but here we have it. The value set. I had misspelled it. It's very quick and with a local host. And that's all here in the latest version of the backend from last week. And here in this version, we have the Fire terminology, which has the Excel template and the subsets. This one has already been loaded with some tested data. They've all been made up. ICD-10s are all invented. This is totally fake. It's just to see how it runs. And then we have this one which with some lines that are not fully complete just to test it. It's like a testing case for the modifications in the Swagger script in the Python script, sorry. So I want to show you how you can interrupt that. You can, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. It can be on the chat or we can stop and analyze this. There's quite a lot here to share and it's sometimes difficult. It's quite intensive. So please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions at any point in time. I'm going to show here the converter. This is the Python file which converts the Excel to file resource. You can see here the you can see the whole logic. It's actually quite simple. It has a lot of detail because here's when you create each of the different resources. So what we do here is we run Python 3. I have it installed here. It could be Python or the name of the script and the name of the Excel file that we want to convert. I'm going to use the one with has already been filled out just to make it more interesting. I can run it, and this creates a file, which is this file here, which is a TJZ file. I will open that and I will expand it. And the TGZ is like Linux. So there's the TGZ, and when you expand it, it has created this package file because it's a Fire package, a whole set of Fire resources together to be imported into a server. So if we look at the content of the TGZ, we can see that it has a description with a .json package, and this is just a standard. And the interesting is that within these files, we have all of the resources. We can see the code systems. The SNOMED obviously is not here because it's already in the terminology server, but this is the ICD-10. This is the URLs, and we can see all of the information coming from the test spreadsheet. And these are all the codes that we're going to make a reference to in ICD-10. This is the one for ICD-11. It has the fragment with the right address, and we have the vaccinations there. And here we have the local system for all the sheets with the local subconcepts, and it has created it. You can see that this has a URL that goes is part of the Excel sheet. There's one that says local system URL. You can change it, and that'll give you the URL. This is an example URL. You should, if you have the one that corresponds to your country. And we have a hand up. Yes, a good morning or good afternoon, but whatever it is. If a country creates a new local code or a new country joins Raxel, locally it's going to have to run the script from their XLS, but they might edit the existing one and using that as part of the package with the code system and the concept map in its own Docker backend deploy, right? Yes, that is right. And yes, I will show you the import step so that you can edit it and run it again. It overruns it, and then when we do the TGZ, it just deletes the previous one and it updates it. Oh, okay, thank you. Now I understand. For example, if I want to change the terminology, I can click here and I can change it, or I can change the codes, no problem. It gives you quite a lot of freedom. So, as I was saying, the next step is to import it. Oh, but sorry, no, these are the code systems I was saying. These are the value sets. You can see that for local, we have a value set for medication, and the code system has everything, but I have a value set for diagnosis, for example. So these are all the local diagnosis. And what we have here is also a local general. This has diagnosis, vaccinations, procedures. It's like different resources that combine things for different combinations. So once we have it, it says here fire package saved to Raxel fire package.tgz and log in the snowstorm with a curl. And this is the operation. And this is a post a form to Fire Admin, and Fire Admin allows us to load the package. So I can copy that sentence, paste it down here, waste a second, and it's as if nothing has happened because I've run a curl. But if we go now to the Docker, you can see here that it was imported within Snowstorm. You can see that it's running the TGZ and says here importing 39 resources found within the index of the package Raxel Fire package, deleting existing code system and concepts, deleting 116. It's deleting and rewriting for all the value sets and all the concept maps. So that means that on the back end, the information has been well registered. But how can I see this information that I have just put on the terminology server? Well, that's what the... Oh, hold on just a second. Bear with me. Just a second, please. Let me go back to the browser. So one way of seeing this is with the value set. You can see all the value sets here that have been updated. They have a different ID now, but it's the same value sets. So what we have here is the Swagger. You have localhost connects to the Swagger, and what we get is the operations that you can use. Let's take a look at them. This is the loading in the terminology server. This is an annotation, and this is the screenshot or the snapshot of the Swagger that we've used. So with the Swagger, we're going to look at the different use cases in order to use all of this content that we have created. My apologies, but we've lost sound.
Escucharte.
Sí, se fue el audio.
Sorry, we have lost sound. Alejandro, we are no longer hearing you.
Ale, no se te escucha. Sí.
Ahí
Ahí se
sí.
escucha. Ah, bueno, bien, perfecto.
Ahora sí, ahora sí.
Ahora sí.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes, okay, sorry, we lost you for a second. I was saying then that we're going to go from all the use cases that you can do with the terminology server that you can use in the Connectathon, and we're going to reproduce that by using the Swagger, and there you will see the interactions. So the first case, which is a little bit outside of scope, Sergio. I wanted to ask you about what you mentioned a while ago regarding the code systems. That spreadsheet that needs to be filled out with the local code systems. What if, because this might be useful for the case of Argentina, what happens when the code system is SNOMED? Just leave it empty. If you leave it empty, then the local code system is empty as a resource, and then is not used when you use when you work in the Connectathon. Okay, no problem. I mean, if you want to say we have an extension and I want to change the code, you can do that. You can replace them. But in generally, if you're using SNOMED and these codes, you just leave it empty, as simple as that. And the same thing here. These SNOMED code or an ICD-10 are reasonable, so you leave the local code empty. So the first case is data entry. You have the systems are working, and most of you are they're not are going to re-implement it. But if you wanted to, you could re-implement it and you could do the exercise. The data entry has to do with the value set expander. That's the operations that you're going to be using. So when you use the value set expand, he says, okay, sure, I want to code our clinical record. Let's say that it's a diagnosis at the local value set. And you can do that. And for example, you can type in here diabetes. Okay, diabetes. Let's say that I write part of it and it gives you the options. It's not found anything that starts with tab. Let's see if we've without the filter. Maybe the server is case sensitive. No, no, it's not working. I tested this before. But anyway, this would allow you to do the ref set and it will give you support to a filter. And I have to find out why this didn't work. Technically, here, the filter has not even got to be the first part. That's because, let's see. Okay. I chose something that is incorrect. My apologies. Hyper, if I put here hypertension. That's because diabetes is not part of the diagnosis. That's why. That's why it didn't work. So it was working well. But if I put hyper for hypertension, or if I put for pneumonia, and it gives me bacterial pneumonia. And so this is the URL that is used, and you can see that this is a local value set. This is the URL, and where it says filter, we have the text filter that we have used. So I can put here, for example, esp now, which is part of the text. Now, it's not using the right order. I'm trying to understand the limits of the file server. So it's only the beginning letters, the beginning part of the text. So if you want to do this with another value set, let's say from CIE 10 or ICD 10, it also works. It just brings the ICD-10 coding. So this just goes to show the interaction. Search based on a field text. It looks for the server, it gets the result, and it brings it back, and you can use that using the server that you already have, but by loading the whole code system and the corresponding value sets. So you can do that for all ICD-10 or all for local, or you can filter it, I don't know, for medication, for example, local medication. You can put here expand, and what you're going to get here at the bottom is, local medication. Hold on. I need to understand, well, what's going on here. I commit to see whether there is an issue with the file or not. So here we should have medications. And so if you decide which value set you're going to expand, you can use it to input the data. Let's go to the next example. For any of these, then you can implement the data entry with the terminology server. Now, don't forget that in order to create the documents, you had these bindings. So for diagnosis, you had to use ICD-10, and in this particular case, we're going to be using the concept map. So let's go back to the Swagger and we're going to go to translate. And translate uses the concept map to go from one to the other. So we can look here. This is an example of, for example, here I have local code L7, which is part of my spreadsheet here for background information. L7 is the local code that no one understands here. So I can go to the Swagger here. This is the code that I have, which is L7, as I was saying. But I want L7, which is the local code, to, this is the URL, to translate that to SNOMED. So I can click there and it says that L7 in local is this code with this text from SNOMED. So I can say, no, from the local, I want to go to ICD-10. It tells me this is M61 and this is the text. So this is the URL. You can implement it, use the translate operation, the code, the system, which is the origin. This is the URL from your local terminology, and in target is the destination. This is the URL in ICD-10. So since you are creating file resources, you can use the mapping in order to choose the concept that terminology binding is requesting, if it's ICD-10 or if it's SNOMED. So you already have the ICD-10. You don't have to use the concept map. You just send the straight the information. But maybe you can use it to get to SNOMED, and that's why we have the link between ICD-10 and SNOMED too. So if you're already using ICD-10 uh, and you have, for example, M51, you can say here, okay, I've got M51 and that's an ICD-10, but I want to get now the SNOMED value. So it's the other way around, if so as to speak. So it says here, sure, we have that, and that's the equivalent to this in SNOMED. All of this is based on the tables. The tables have been put together in the resources. So like this, then we can use to comply, you can use it to comply with the IPS and the vaccination certificate is requesting. You can use the mapping, but you can also use it the other way around. You can say, for example, we receive a standard document that comes with the code M51, which I don't know what it is, but we do have a local system, and we can execute the mapping the other way around, and it says that code M51 in my clinical records is L7, even if it's called M51 in ICD-10. Or if we get a SNOMED code, it says, I don't know, for example, this code here, we can put that code here. We can say that the origin is SNOMED and we want to see it in local value. And it tells you, oh, it's L5. And that allows you the other way around to receive an electronic document that has been coded according to these international standards and to take it to your terminology, to your local terminology. That's basically it. So here you can see that there are other operations like validating the code. You can say, is this an accepted medication? You can write the code here and say it from this code system, and you want to know whether it's part of these value sets, and it'll tell you whether it is valid or not. So basically, with this, then you will have everything that you need in order to carry out the connectathon using terminology. These are the fires or what are used in the different protocols. So what you have to do in order to achieve that, as I was saying, is just editing this and if you have the international codes, you can leave the local codes blank. Then you have to do the Python script, and once you have the Python script, you can use it. Once you have it, then you can start playing with these operations that we have just seen. And the idea is that the Swagger will help you, especially with the expand and translate, in order to play around and to look at the different results. Don't forget that if you change the URL of the code system, you have to go here and you have to change it. You can do that manually. It's a predetermined list. And it's not mandatory. This is just a game. I mean, if you actually do it, then you would have to change it here. But the idea is that you could adapt the Python script in order to transform data that you already have and upload them and use it in production even. Currently, the Python script depends on these tables that have to start here. This is very strict for these purposes, and it has all of this information. The table is very flexible, but the format in itself is actually quite strict. If you say, we have a file, well, you have to change, you can change the script in order to read the CCV to create a call system, the value sets that you need, have your concept map, and you can start using through the Fire API. That will allow you in the future to change code systems without any problems whatsoever. So with this, we can play around and test it. The idea is in 2 more weeks, in 10 more days, to get together in workshop 3, August the 23rd at the same time, to try and see the problems that you may have come across and to see how you're going to be using that in the Connectathon. In the meantime, we're available in Slack. Send us your comments. We're there to try and help you out. So don't forget, for all of this to work, you have to have, in order to have Swagger, you need the latest version of the Docker, which is the one that has the Swagger included, and you have to work on the tables. And if I check here, and if we have this value set here, I can check and for the little mistakes that I saw, and we will update that in the server. This will be updated. You you will run a curl and you'll be able to have the new version of the code. We'll fix that. And if you update it and it's not right, you can run it again and don't forget that it overwrites, so there's not a big issue there. Are there any doubts, any questions? Why don't we use real codes? Snowmed are the real ones, and ICD-10, it was just a matter of time. We will be using real codes. When you have several local codes for COVID, do we have to pick one? Yes, in the case of vaccinations, there were some who had the vaccination by brand, and I think COVID are here. Yes, the first one here is COVID. It's a generic, and you have different codes for you can add lines, no problem. The SNOMED will always be the same code, and the ICD-11 will also be the same one. ICD-11 is already real. This is SNOMED, and this is so if you ICD-11 is already the real one, you can simply duplicate the line and then you change the code here on the left. You can change the name, local term, but keep the same ICD-11 and the same SNOMED codes. Is it mandatory to use the system if we already have a catalog? I mean, the goal of the Connectathon is to use the API Fire. If you have the data, you can upload it here, and the idea is for the exercise. I mean, it's like playing the games with interoperability, using the mapping and using the API that we have here, which is the translate. Now, obviously, if you have something that where you can already use the mapping, I mean, sure, you can do it. But I don't know what the rules of the Connectathon are going to be to see whether they can do their own mapping or they have to use the API mapping. I'm not too sure. Yes, it's just like you said, the transaction is what's really important here. Within the Connectathon, we're going to be checking the transactions. That's what will be evaluated in the Connectathon exercise. Mostly translate will be the most critical one. Expand is a little bit more relative. ITI 1OU, the translate, this is the main one. Expand with the filter that I was showing you. That's optional. Lookup and validate code are also optional. These are optional, but translate is the main one. Are there any additional questions? Very well then. So we will be available in Slack. So try and load the resources. Remember that if you're already using these codes, then you can leave the local code columns empty. You can load it and you can start with the Swagger, use the translate and carry out these operations that you will be using in the Connectathon. Carlos, all yours. Okay, so if there are no further doubts, then we can close it. Those that have not completed the spreadsheet that was shared with you, please do so as soon as possible. During these coming weeks, the exercise is working on the terminology, making sure that you are ready for the next webinar. Any doubts that maybe Alejandro you can help us with. The monitors will also be checking on you over Slack. When we publish ICD-10, you can copy that from the new sheet and you can then just paste it here. If you have ICD-10 empty, well, leave it like that, and then once you get the codes, you can copy and paste them. That will be sent out by Sergio. It'll be already coded, and then once pasting it, you can run it. I mean, you can run it before to test it. You can do it with some of these testing values. You can use your local code to start playing around. But to have the definitive one, once you get the final code, you can paste them here and then you can run it again. And every time you run a conversion, the TGZ is created, and every time that's created, you need to upload it into the server with the operations that we have here. Thank you so much then. No, thank you, Alejandro. I want to thank all the participants. If you have any doubt, don't forget to use the Slack channel, and this presentation will be uploaded this afternoon. I'll see you again next session on Thursday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Chao, gracias.
Gracias, buenas tardes a todos.
Buen día.
Muchas gracias, que estén muy bien.